The note sat on my kitchen counter like a coiled snake. Cream-colored paper, expensive stock, folded with precise creases that spoke of methodical patience. I recognized the handwriting immediately. The same elegant script that had addressed countless party invitations and thank you cards over the years. You'll regret refusing the settlement, Ellie. Some doors should stay closed. I crumpled the paper in my fist, my fingers trembling. Linda had always excelled at veiled threats, wrapped in sophistication. 5 years of marriage to her son had taught me to read between the lines of her carefully chosen words. Quite the welcome home gift, I muttered, tossing the ball of paper into the trash. The empty boxes scattered around my new apartment seemed to mock me, each one a reminder of everything I'd walked away from. The Martin family fortune, the sprawling estate, the carefully curated image of the perfect daughter-in-law. My phone buzzed. David's face appeared on the screen and my stomach clenched. I let it ring 4 times before answering. What do you want? Mom's worried about you. His voice carried that familiar note of practiced concern. She thinks you're making a mistake. Your mother's always worried when she can't control something. I moved to the window, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled. Tell her the divorce is final. The settlement's off the table. I'm done. You're being stubborn, Elle. This isn't like you. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you never knew who I really was. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. In the background, I heard Mia's voice, sharp and insistent. Of course she was there. David's sister never missed an opportunity to orchestrate family drama. Jake mentioned he saw you at the agency today, David said finally. Said you seemed different. My fingers tightened around the phone. Jake, Mia's perfect fiancé, with his practiced smile and watchful eyes. Tell your sister's lapdog to focus on his own business. I'm sure Linda has plenty for him to do. Don't start with conspiracy theories, Ellie. It's beneath you. I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. Beneath me? Like the way your mother tried to buy my silence? Or how Mia spread those rumors at the country club? You're paranoid. This is exactly why. Why what? Why Linda thinks I need to be managed? Why you never stood up to them? My voice cracked. I found another note, David. Want to pretend you don't know anything about that either? The sharp intake of breath told me everything. What note? Ask your mother. Better yet, ask Jake. He's gotten good at delivering her messages. I ended the call before he could respond, my hand shaking. Across the street, a car idled in the growing darkness. Black, expensive, familiar. I'd seen it outside my office earlier today. My phone buzzed again. A text from Sophie. Drinks? You sound like you need to talk. I hesitated. Sophie had been my rock through the divorce, but lately something felt off. Little comments that didn't quite fit. Questions that probed too deep. Another note slid under my door, the paper whispering against the hard wood. My heart pounded as I picked it up, unfolding it with unsteady fingers. Family protects its own. Remember that. I stared at the words, feeling something shift inside me. The fear and confusion of the past months crystallized into something harder, colder. They wanted to play games. Fine. But they'd forgotten something crucial about me. I wasn't just David's ex-wife anymore. I wasn't the quiet graphic designer who smiled at family functions and kept the peace. I was Ellie Martin, and I knew enough of their secrets to burn their perfect world to the ground. I pulled out my phone and texted Sophie back. Rain check. I have some family matters to handle. The car across the street started its engine. I smiled, letting the curtain fall back into place. Let them watch. Let them worry. The game was just beginning. The creative agency's conference room felt like a trap. Mia sat across from me, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against my portfolio, that familiar smirk playing at her lips. Of all the marketing firms in the city, she had to choose mine. These concepts are... She paused, examining the mock-ups I'd spent weeks perfecting. Basic, uninspired. Honestly, Ellie, I expected more from someone who used to have access to the best creative directors in the industry. Used to have. The words stung like a paper cut. The brief asked for clean and minimal. That's what I delivered. The Martin Group's aesthetic has evolved. We're looking for something more sophisticated. She slid the portfolio back, her diamond engagement ring catching the light. Jake's latest gift, no doubt. Maybe you're just out of touch. My jaw clenched. This wasn't about the designs. This was about marking territory, showing me what I'd lost. Funny, considering your last campaign tanked. How many followers did you lose after that tone-deaf influencer stunt? Her smile froze. At least I didn't lose a husband. No, just your originality. How much did Linda pay to keep that scandal quiet? The conference room door opened before Mia could respond. Jake strode in, all polished charm and calculated timing. Ladies, hope I'm not interrupting. Perfect timing, Mia purred, standing to kiss his cheek. I was just explaining to Ellie why we'll be going with a different agency. I gathered my portfolio, fighting to keep my hand steady. Of course you will. Nepotism's always been the family specialty. Jake's expression hardened for a fraction of a second. Actually, I wanted to discuss something else. The Foundation's annual gala. What about it? Linda insisted we extend an invitation. For old time's sake. The trap snapped shut. The gala was Linda's crown jewel, her chance to parade her perfect family in front of Boston's elite. My absence would spark gossip. My presence would force me to play happy families. I'm busy that night. It's next month, Mia cut in. You don't even know the date. I'm busy every night. Jake leaned against the table, too close. David will be there. He misses you, Ellie. We all do. The lie hung in the air like poison. Through the glass walls, I could see my co-workers pretending not to watch the drama unfold. This was exactly what they wanted, to make me squirm, to remind me I was an outsider now. My phone buzzed, a text from Sophie. Emergency, need you now. Sorry to cut this short, I said, standing, but some of us have real work to do. Mia's voice followed me to the door. Mom's expecting your RSVP by Friday. Don't disappoint her again. I found Sophie waiting in the lobby, her face pale. You need to see this. She thrust her phone at me. On the screen was Linda's social media page, featuring a fresh post, a photo of David and me from last Christmas, his arm around my waist, both of us laughing. The caption read, "Some bonds can't be broken. Looking forward to reuniting our family at next month's gala. # second chances, # family first." That manipulative witch, I whispered. The post already had hundreds of likes, dozens of supportive comments. Linda had effectively backed me into a corner. Refused to attend, and I'd look bitter, show up, and I'd play right into their narrative. There's more, Sophie said quietly. Look at the background. I zoomed in. Behind us, partially obscured but visible, was Jake. He was watching us, his expression cold and calculating. The same look he'd given me moments ago in the conference room. He's been playing both sides, Sophie said. The question is why? My phone buzzed again. Another note, this time by email. Anonymous. Ask Jake about Project Phoenix. Follow the money. I looked up through the lobby windows. Mia and Jake were leaving together, his hand possessive on her lower back. But as they reached their car, he glanced back at the building. At me. You're right, I told Sophie, a plan already forming. The question is why, and I think it's time we found out. I pulled up the gala invitation on my phone and typed 2 words that would change everything. Attending, solo. The game was changing. They wanted to push me around, use me as a pawn in their family power plays. Fine, but pawns can become queens, and I was done playing defense. Project Phoenix wasn't just a financial scheme. It was a massacre in the making. I stared at the documents on my laptop screen, my coffee growing cold beside me. 3 shell companies, all leading back to Jake, all funneling money from Linda's charitable foundation into offshore accounts. The coffee shop's ambient noise faded as I dug deeper. Construction permits, environmental impact reports, all doctored. The Martin Group's latest development project wasn't just about luxury condos. They were building on contaminated land. Land that Jake had personally certified as clean. My phone lit up. David's number. "You've been asking questions," he said without preamble. "Stop. Funny how everyone keeps telling me that." I switched to speaker, continuing to scroll through files. "How many families were planning to move into those condos, David?" "It's not what you think." "Really?" "Because I'm looking at soil reports that Jake buried, the kind that show toxicity levels that could kill children." A sharp intake of breath. "Where did you get those?" "The same place I got the proof that your mother's foundation is laundering money." My voice remained steady, even as my hands shook. "Did you know? Or were you just another puppet?" "Ellie, listen to me. You're in danger. Jake knows you've been digging." "Good." I clicked through another document. "Then he knows what's coming." "This isn't a game." David's voice cracked. "He's been meeting with people, the kind that don't show up in boardrooms." The coffee shop's door chimed. Jake walked in, his eyes scanning the room until they locked on mine. My heart stuttered. "I have to go," I whispered into the phone. "Ellie, don't." I ended the call as Jake slid into the seat across from me. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Productive morning?" he asked, nodding at my laptop. "Just catching up on work." I moved to close the screen, but his hand shot out, gripping my wrist. "Let's skip the dance, shall we?" His fingers tightened. "Those files you're so interested in, they're protected by about 6 different non-disclosure agreements. The kind that come with serious consequences. Like building homes that could poison families." His smile widened. "You always were smarter than they gave you credit for. It's almost a shame." "What is, that I figured out your game? That you won't be around to see how it ends?" He released my wrist, reaching into his jacket. A manila envelope appeared, sliding across the table. Inside is a one-way ticket to Vancouver, first class, very generous severance package included. I didn't touch it. "And if I refuse?" "Then I stop being so generous." He leaned forward, voice dropping. "Ask yourself, is this really worth dying for? Is Mia worth lying to?" I countered. "Does she know her perfect fiancé is bleeding her family dry?" Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Mia understands sacrifice. Linda taught her well. The question is, what are you willing to sacrifice?" My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. "Don't trust anyone. Coming to you now." Jake's eyes flicked to my phone. "Ah, the loyal friend. Tell me, have you ever wondered why Sophie's so interested in the Martin family's affairs?" Ice spread through my veins. "What are you talking about?" "Check her credentials, her real ones." He stood, straightening his jacket. "You have 24 hours to take the deal. After that," he shrugged, "well, accidents happen." He left me sitting there, the envelope untouched between us. My screen still showed the damning evidence, but now it felt like a bomb waiting to explode. I pulled up a search engine, typing Sophie's name with trembling fingers. The results loaded. My coffee cup crashed to the floor. Sophie Reed didn't exist. At least, not the Sophie I knew. But Sarah Reynolds did. A former employee of the Martin Group, fired 5 years ago after a scandal involving missing funds. A scandal that Linda had quietly buried. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Sophie, Sarah, hadn't been helping me. She'd been monitoring me, reporting back to Linda, maybe even helping orchestrate this whole thing. My phone buzzed again. "Sophie, almost there. Don't move." I grabbed my laptop and the envelope, leaving the spilled coffee spreading across the floor like a dark omen. The game had changed. I wasn't just fighting the Martins anymore. I was surrounded by ghosts of their past victims, and I was running out of people to trust. The gala invitation mocked me from my desk as I uploaded the final pieces of evidence to an encrypted drive. 24 hours had passed since Jake's threat. My hands hadn't stopped shaking, but my resolve had crystallized into something harder than fear. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Sophie, Sarah, whatever her name was. She'd been calling non-stop since I'd fled the coffee shop. "I know you're in there, Ellie." Her voice carried that familiar concern, now twisted with new meaning. "We need to talk." I opened my laptop instead, pulling up the video feed from the hidden camera I'd installed in my office last week. The timestamp showed yesterday afternoon. Sophie rifling through my desk drawers while I was at lunch, photographing documents with practiced efficiency. My phone buzzed. "David." "Did you take the deal?" he asked without preamble. "Would you?" A long pause. "No, but I'm not the one they're trying to silence." "Aren't you?" I watched Sophie through the peephole, still waiting. "How long have you known about Jake's real business?" "Ellie." "The truth, David, for once." He exhaled slowly. "Since the Ferguson project, I found discrepancies in the environmental reports, but Jake, he made it clear what would happen if I didn't sign off." "You mean what would happen to me?" "They were watching you, following you, the notes, the threats. They were just the beginning." Sophie knocked again, harder. "Ellie, please. You don't understand what's really happening." I turned away from the door, lowering my voice. "What about your sister? Does Mia know she's marrying a criminal?" "Mia's not as naive as you think." David's voice hardened. "She's always been Mother's perfect soldier." The pieces clicked into place. "The foundation gala, that's when they're closing the deal on Project Phoenix, isn't it?" His silence was answer enough. "All those investors," I pressed. "The press, the perfect cover for transferring the funds." "Don't go to the gala, Ellie. Please." A key scraped in my lock, the spare I'd given Sophie months ago. I ended the call and grabbed my laptop, slipping into the bedroom just as the front door opened. "I'm trying to help you," Sophie called out. Her footsteps moved through the apartment. "Linda sent me to protect you." I eased open the window, heart pounding. The fire escape creaked beneath my feet. "The evidence you have," Sophie continued, "it goes deeper than Jake. There are people involved who make him look like an amateur." I froze, one foot on the metal grating. "Linda's not the villain here," she said, closer now. "She's trying to contain something much worse. And you're about to blow everything wide open." The bedroom door opened. Our eyes met through the half-open window. "Sarah Reynolds," I said quietly. "That's your real name, isn't it?" Something flickered in her expression. Pain, maybe regret. "I was trying to stop them, just like you are now. But Linda, she gave me a choice, the same choice she's giving you. Submission or destruction. Survival." She took the step forward. "The gala isn't just about money laundering. It's about power, control, the kind that gets people killed." I pulled the flash drive from my pocket. "You mean like this?" Everything I found about Project Phoenix, the shell companies, the contaminated land. Enough to destroy them all. "Ellie, don't. I trusted you." My voice cracked. "Every secret, every fear, you reported it all back to them, didn't you?" She moved closer, hands raised. "I was protecting you the only way I could. By betraying me. By keeping you alive." Her composure cracked. "Do you think Jake's threats are empty? Ask yourself why Linda's kept me around all these years. What I had to do to earn my second chance." The implications turned my stomach. But beneath the fear, something else burned. Determination. "The gala's in 3 days," I said, stepping back onto the fire escape. "Tell Linda I'll be there. Tell her I'm done running." "That's exactly what they want," I smiled, cold and sharp. "No, they want me scared, controlled, but I'm done being their victim." I descended the metal stairs, Sophie's warnings fading behind me. The flash drive felt heavy in my pocket, a weapon more dangerous than any threat they could make. Let them think they'd won. Let them believe I was walking into their trap. They'd forgotten one crucial detail. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destruction, it's about justice. The gala invitation felt like a loaded gun in my evening clutch. 2 hours in, and the Martin family's carefully orchestrated performance was reaching its crescendo. Linda held court near the fountain, her silver dress catching light like armor. Jake worked the room with practiced charm, leading potential investors toward private conversations in shadowy corners. I adjusted my microphone, a delicate piece of equipment borrowed from a former client who owed me a favor. The flash drive in my purse contained enough evidence to destroy them all, but timing was everything. You clean up nice. David appeared beside me, his bow tie slightly askew, a deliberate imperfection his mother would hate. Though I'm surprised they let you through the door. Your mother's idea. Keep your enemies closer, right? His fingers brushed my arm. You're not the enemy, Elle. No? I watched Jake lead another investor away. Then why is your future brother-in-law planning to disappear with half the foundation's money tonight? David's grip tightened. What are you talking about? Project Phoenix isn't just about contaminated land anymore. It's about making sure the Martin family takes the fall while Jake walks away rich. Before he could respond, Mia materialized between us, her smile sharp as broken glass. Dance with me, brother dear. Mother insists. I watched them move away, catching Linda's calculated stare across the room. She raised her champagne glass in mock salute. My phone buzzed. Sophie. Don't do this. Last chance to walk away. I deleted the message and moved toward the service corridor. The real meeting would happen soon, Jake and his conspirators finalizing their plan while the party provided cover. Going somewhere? Mia's voice froze me mid-step. The party's this way, dear sister. I needed air. Funny, that's exactly what Jake said. She stepped closer, perfume mixing with threat. He's not as clever as he thinks he is. Neither are you. Understanding clicked. You know what he's planning. I know everything. Her smile turned predatory. Why do you think I agreed to marry him? Mother needed someone on the inside. The pieces shifted, realigning into a new pattern. The notes, the threats. That was you. Jake needed to believe he was in control, that his plan was working. She adjusted my necklace with false sisterly concern. But he forgot who really runs this family. Linda. Always. Her fingers lingered near my throat. The question is, whose side are you really on, Ellie? Because that wire you're wearing, we've been broadcasting static for the past hour. My blood turned to ice. Behind Mia, I saw Jake emerge from the service corridor, his face flushed with victory. He caught my eye and smiled, the smile of a man who thought he'd won. The evidence, I started. Is already being handled. Mia's voice dropped to a whisper. But you might want to check on that friend of yours. Sophie, or Sarah, rather. She made quite a scene at the security office earlier. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number. Evidence secured. Waiting for your signal. S. Mia read the message over my shoulder, her composure cracking for the first time. What did you do? I smiled, echoing her earlier predatory expression. You forgot something about family, Mia, about why Linda chose me for David in the first place. And what's that? I learned from the best. I pulled out my clutch, opening it to reveal the flash drive. It's a copy. The originals went to the FBI an hour ago. Every document, every transaction, every player, including Linda's master plan to double-cross Jake. The color drained from her face. You're lying. Ask Sophie. She's not working for Linda anymore. Turns out revenge is a powerful motivator. Across the room, commotion erupted near the entrance. Federal agents moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency. Jake's smile vanished as he spotted them, his escape route suddenly blocked. Linda stood frozen by the fountain, her champagne glass slipping from nerveless fingers. The crash echoed through the suddenly silent room. You destroyed everything, Mia whispered. I watched as David caught my eye across the chaos, something like pride mixing with his shock. No, I said quietly. You did that yourselves. I just made sure everyone paid their fair share. The agents moved closer and I stepped away from Mia's reaching hands. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about letting them destroy themselves. The interrogation room's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the table. 3 hours since the gala imploded, and Linda's influence still reached through these walls. The detective across from me slid another photo across the metal surface. Explain this again, he said, tapping Jake's image. Your relationship with the accused. I already told you, he's my ex-sister-in-law's fiancé. Was. He pushed another photo forward. Jake in handcuffs, Mia's engagement ring glinting as she turned away from cameras. before the suicide attempt. My fingers froze on the water cup. What? Mr. Turner tried to hang himself in holding. Lucky the guard caught it in time. He studied my reaction. Interesting timing, considering the evidence against him disappeared an hour before. The door opened. Linda walked in, impeccable despite everything, her lawyer hovering like a shadow. "This interview is over," the lawyer announced. "Ms. Martin is free to go." The detective's jaw tightened. "We're not finished." "Oh, but you are." Linda's smile could freeze hell. "Unless you'd like to explain why you're questioning my former daughter-in-law without counsel present." Outside, rain pelted the parking lot. Linda's car idled by the curb, driver standing ready with an umbrella. She caught my arm before I could escape. "Impressive performance," she said softly. "Using Sophie to plant false evidence, making Jake think he was winning while you dismantled everything. You learned well." "I learned survival." "Did you?" Her grip tightened. "Because right now, the only evidence of financial fraud points to you and Jake. Quite the paper trail you created. And with his attempted suicide, well, guilt can look very convincing to a jury." My blood ran cold. "You switched the evidence." "I protected my family, like I always have." She released me, straightening my collar with false concern. "The question is, what will David think when he learns the truth?" "What truth?" "That his ex-wife orchestrated his sister's fiancé's downfall out of bitter revenge. That she manipulated everyone, including her supposed best friend, to destroy his family's reputation." She sighed. "Poor Sophie. She really thought she was helping you get justice. Now she's facing accessory charges." "You can't. I already have." Linda opened her car door. "But there's still time to fix this. Confess to working alone, clear Sophie's name, and I'll make sure David knows you were just unstable, grieving your failed marriage." Through the rain, I saw David waiting by his car across the lot. His expression was unreadable, but the distance between us felt infinite. "You have until morning," Linda said. "Choose wisely." She left me standing there, rain soaking through my gala dress. My phone buzzed. Sophie's number from the detention center. "They're saying I helped steal the foundation money. What's happening?" Another message followed, from an unknown number. "Evidence secured offshore. Ready when you are. But it will burn everyone, including David, your call." I watched Linda's car pull away, taking with it any illusion of victory. The game hadn't just changed, it had revealed its true stakes. Save myself and destroy David, or sacrifice everything to protect the others caught in the crossfire. My phone buzzed again. "David, we need to talk, about Jake, about everything." I stared at the message, remembering the way he used to look at me before his family poisoned everything, before I learned to poison things back. The detective watched through the station window, probably wondering why I hadn't left yet. In his eyes, I saw what Linda had orchestrated, the perfect narrative of a vengeful ex-wife, a tragic suicide attempt, a family destroyed by obsession. She'd turned my revenge into my prison. My phone lit up one final time. "Mia, you wanted to burn it all down? Congratulations, but you're burning with us." As I stepped into the rain, letting it wash away the last traces of the gala, of the person I thought I could be. Linda was right about one thing. I had learned from her, perhaps too well. The question wasn't whether I could save myself anymore. It was whether there was anything left worth saving. David waited by his car, keys in hand, while Sophie's future hung by a thread, and Jake's attempted suicide cast shadows over everything. The evidence that could free me would destroy them all. Sometimes revenge doesn't just destroy your enemies. It devours everything you ever loved. The Martin Estates library felt smaller than I remembered. Linda sat behind the massive oak desk, her composure intact despite the headlines screaming across her tablet. Jake's suicide attempt, the Foundation's frozen assets, her own impending arrest, all carefully arranged like pieces on a chessboard. "I always wondered who would break first," she said, closing a leather portfolio. "You or David?" "Where is he?" "Dealing with the press. Someone needs to maintain appearances. She smiled thinly, though I suppose that's difficult when your ex-wife is revealed as a vindictive criminal. The hidden camera in my necklace felt heavy. One conversation, that's all I needed. One confession to undo her careful manipulations. Funny thing about appearances, I said, moving closer. They're easy to manufacture, like suicide attempts staged in holding cells. Her fingers stilled on the desk. Jake's instability is well documented. By the same doctors who helped you fake medical records last year. The ones who covered up the real reason behind David's father's death. The first crack in her armor, a slight widening of eyes, a sharp intake of breath. You're desperate, Ellie. Making wild accusations won't save you. No? I pulled out my phone, playing a recording. Jake's voice, slurred but clear, confessing how Linda had orchestrated everything. The evidence swap, the suicide attempt, the years of manipulation. He was sedated, she dismissed, unstable. He was honest, finally. I leaned forward, just like Sophie was when she told me about Sarah Reynolds. About what really happened 5 years ago. Linda stood, mask slipping. That file was sealed. Amazing what people remember when they're facing prison. Sophie may have betrayed me, but she betrayed you first. Told me everything about how you orchestrated my marriage to David. How you needed someone controllable after Sarah threatened to expose your husband's death. You have no proof. Don't I? The library door opened. David stood there, face ashen, his phone recording everything. Behind him, Mia watched with tears streaming down her face. How long? She whispered. Long enough, David answered. The whole conversation, Mother. It's over. Linda's laugh was brittle. You'd believe her over your own mother, after everything she's done, after everything you made her do. David's voice cracked. The threatening notes, the pressure, the constant manipulation, it was all you, always has been. I protected this family. You destroyed it, Mia cut in. Jake told me everything before. Before you had him, she couldn't finish. Linda moved with surprising speed, reaching for her desk drawer. I knew what she kept there. Had seen the gun during countless family meetings. But David was faster. His hand caught her wrist as Mia grabbed the weapon, years of obedience shattering in one moment. The police are already here, I said quietly. Along with the FBI. The real evidence isn't offshore. It's been in their hands for weeks. Every document, every recording, every piece of your perfect plan. Linda sagged against the desk, decades of control crumbling. I did it for you, she whispered to David. Everything was for you. No. He stepped back, letting federal agents enter the room. Everything was for your control, and now you've lost it all. As they led Linda away, I felt nothing but emptiness. No triumph, no satisfaction, just the hollow echo of victory that felt more like loss. What happens now? Mia asked, her voice small. I looked at David, seeing the same exhaustion in his eyes. Now we tell the truth. All of it. No more games, no more manipulation. And us? He asked softly. There is no us anymore. There never really was. I touched his cheek one last time. We were just pieces in her game. But at least now we're free to write our own endings. Outside, reporters swarmed the gates as Linda Martin was escorted to a waiting car. Sophie stood among them, our eyes meeting briefly before she turned away. Another relationship casualties in this war of secrets. My phone buzzed one final time. An unknown number. Thank you, Sarah R. Sometimes victory tastes like ashes. But from ashes, something new can grow. Something true. The courthouse steps felt colder than they should in spring. Linda's sentencing had drawn the usual crowd. Reporters, curious onlookers, vultures circling the remains of the Martin family empire. I watched from across the street as David guided Mia through the chaos, their shoulders straight despite everything. My phone buzzed. Jake's lawyer. Client wishes to speak with you. Urgent. I deleted the message. Jake had survived his suicide attempt, but his testimony had sealed Linda's fate. Some bridges weren't worth rebuilding. Quite the spectacle. Sophie, Sarah, appeared beside me, looking different in formal clothes instead of her usual therapist attire. Linda's facing 20 years. You testified against her. We all did. She handed me a coffee, a peace offering or a farewell, I couldn't tell which. The Foundation's legitimate projects are being transferred to new management. David's handling the transition. And Mia, starting over in London, as far from Linda's shadow as she can get. I watched David field questions from reporters, his responses measured and diplomatic. He'd learned that from his mother, the art of appearing in control while everything crumbled. The threatening notes, I said quietly. They weren't just from Linda, were they? Sophie's silence was answer enough. You wanted me to fight back, to expose everything. I turned to face her. Why? Because Linda destroyed both our lives. The difference was, you had the strength to destroy her back. She smiled sadly. I just needed to give you a push. Across the street, the courthouse doors opened. Linda emerged between officers, her designer suit replaced by prison orange. Our eyes met briefly. In that moment, I saw something I never expected: respect. Mrs. Martin, a reporter shouted, any comment on the allegations that you orchestrated your husband's death? Linda's mask slipped for just a second. It was enough. Some secrets stay buried, Sophie murmured, for everyone's sake. My phone buzzed again. A text from David. She asked for you, one last time. I deleted that message too. What will you do now? Sophie asked. The answer came easier than I expected. Live, without looking over my shoulder, without playing anyone's games but my own. And the Martin family? Isn't my family anymore. I handed her back the untouched coffee. Neither are you. She nodded, understanding the finality in my voice. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not for helping bring Linda down, but for lying about who I was. We're all liars, Sarah. Some of us are just better at admitting it. I turned away as Linda was escorted to the prison transport, her head still held high. The reporters surged forward, but David and Mia were already retreating into their waiting car. The Martin family's final act played out on the courthouse steps. My own car waited around the corner, packed for a trip with no fixed destination. On the passenger seat lay one last note, not threatening this time, but revealing. Linda's handwriting, delivered by her lawyer this morning. You were the daughter I should have had. Remember that when they tell you my story. I crumpled the note and let it fall. The past could keep its own secrets now. The engine started with a quiet purr. In my rearview mirror, I caught a final glimpse of the courthouse, of David watching me leave, of Sophie standing alone on the steps, all the players in a game that had consumed years of our lives. But games end, players walk away. And sometimes winning means knowing when to stop playing. I pulled into traffic, leaving behind the echoes of revenge and the ghost of what could have been. The road ahead was clear, unmarked by threats or manipulation. For the first time since I'd married into the Martin family, I felt truly free. Not from the consequences, those would follow us all, but from the need to make anyone pay for them. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies or protecting yourself. It's about choosing to write your own story, even when others try to hold the pen. I drove on, letting the city fade behind me, carrying only what I needed, the truth, my freedom, and the knowledge that some victories come not from what you take, but from what you choose to leave behind.
Hello, my name is Ellie, and I'd like to share a bit about my life with you. I'm 30 years old, passionate about fitness, and I work as an instructor at a local gym. That's where I met Aiden, who started as a regular attendee and soon became much more than that. We had an immediate connection, and before long, we were planning our wedding. Aiden has a younger brother named Kevin, a genuinely cool guy, and we became fast friends. However, Aiden's mom, Violet, has been a challenge from the start. She took an instant dislike to me, accusing me of being a gym rat leading her sons astray. One day, an incident at the gym brought everything to a head. Aiden was lifting weights, Kevin was on the treadmill, and I was coaching a class when Violet walked in unexpectedly. I greeted her cheerfully, trying to keep the peace, but she responded with a cold glare, accusing me of keeping an eye on her boys. I was taken aback, simply trying to do my job, but Violet retorted dismissively about me, parading around in tight clothes. Aiden, hearing this, dropped his weights with a loud clang and came over to defend me, but Violet was relentless. Fair? I see what's happening here, she snapped, condemning my friendly demeanor, especially toward men. Kevin, catching his breath after his run, tried to mediate, but Violet sharply told him not to interfere. As the situation escalated, I attempted to defuse it by reassuring Violet that I was just working and that there was nothing inappropriate going on. However, Violet continued her tirade, even bringing up my Instagram interactions as evidence of inappropriate behavior. Aiden tried to explain that those were merely clients and friends, but Violet was convinced there was more to it. The confrontation reached a peak with Violet storming out, leaving us in an awkward silence. Aiden apologized and put his arm around me, while Kevin jokingly compared Violet to a bulldog. Although I tried to laugh it off, Violet's accusations hurt me deeply. That night, as Aiden and I lay in bed, he reassured me of his trust, which I appreciated, but the shadow of Violet's doubts lingered over us. This confrontation at the gym was just the beginning of ongoing tensions. During a later family dinner at Aiden's place, the atmosphere was tense. Kevin attempted to lighten the mood by asking about my job, but Violet used the opportunity to make another snide remark about me flirting at work. Aiden, sitting beside me, tensed up and pleaded with his mother to stop, highlighting the ongoing strain in our relationship. Violet's criticisms were unyielding. "I'll say what I need to," she declared sharply. "I've seen those comments on your Instagram, Ellie. Men fawning over you, as if you're some sort of trophy." The flush of anger and embarrassment rose in my cheeks as I tried to explain. "Violet, they're just clients and friends from the gym. There's nothing inappropriate going on." She scoffed at my explanation. "Friends? Is that the new term for it?" Kevin stepped in, trying to shield me from her harsh words. "Mom, you're completely off the mark here." But Violet's gaze only hardened as she turned towards him. "And you, always defending her. What's really going on between you two? Always together, always whispering." Her accusation sliced through the air, heavy and toxic. Aiden's expression was a mix of disbelief and anger. "Mom, what the hell are you talking about?" he demanded. Violet leaned in, her eyes piercing into me. "I'm talking about betrayal, Aiden. Your wife and your brother sneaking around." I was stunned into silence. Her words were ludicrous. "That's a vile thing to say," I managed to get out. "Kevin's like a brother to me." Kevin, visibly upset, added, "Mom, you're completely out of line. Ellie's my sister-in-law, nothing more." Aiden's voice dropped, a dangerous edge to his tone. "Mom, you need to stop. This is ridiculous." But Violet was relentless. "Open your eyes, Aiden. I'm just trying to protect you from her." The rest of the meal passed in an uneasy quiet. After dinner, the tension followed us into the bedroom where Aiden, shaking with contained rage, confronted me. "Ellie, is there any truth to what my mom is saying about you and Kevin?" I felt as though I had been slapped. "Aiden, are you serious? Your mom's accusations are absurd. You know me, you know Kevin. How could you even entertain those ideas?" Aiden paced back and forth, his hands buried in his hair. "I don't know what to think anymore, Ellie. My mom's doubts have me questioning everything." I was on the brink of tears. "So, you're taking her side? You believe her over me?" He stopped and looked at me, his expression lost and tormented. "I don't know what I believe anymore. I need some time to think." And with that, he left the room, leaving me alone, wounded and bewildered. Violet's words had burrowed deep, casting a long shadow over our relationship. I knew then that things between Aiden and me might never be the same. A few months after that fateful dinner, I discovered I was pregnant. This should have been joyful news, but given the circumstances, it felt like yet another complication. I remember the moment I told Aiden. We were in the kitchen, a place that once echoed with our laughter. Aiden, I'm pregnant, I said, my voice shaking. He looked up, his face a blend of astonishment and an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Pregnant? Wow. Are you sure? His reaction stung. Yes, I'm sure, Aiden. We're going to have a baby. He walked over and embraced me, but even in his hug, there was a tension that hadn't been there before. The future felt uncertain, and Violet's poisonous words lingered, threatening the joy that should have come with our impending new arrival. The air felt tense and unnatural, even more so than usual, as Aiden and I approached Violet's house for our regular Sunday visit. With every step closer, my heart sank a bit more, knowing the news of my pregnancy had already reached her ears. As expected, Violet greeted us with a sharp, piercing look. So, I hear you're pregnant, Ellie, she said, her voice laden with skepticism and veiled accusations. Yes, we're excited, Aiden responded, trying to keep the atmosphere light. But Violet's skepticism was palpable as she arched an eyebrow and asked, expecting, huh? And Aiden, you're sure it's yours? Aiden's face tightened with frustration. Mom, don't start this again, he warned, but Violet was relentless. I'm just voicing what everyone's thinking. Your wife has been quite friendly with a lot of men. I was stunned by her boldness. Violet, are you actually suggesting that I've been unfaithful? That this child isn't Aiden's? I asked, incredulity painting my voice. She just shrugged nonchalantly. I'm just looking out for my son. A mother's concern is natural, she claimed. Kevin, who had been silent until then, finally spoke up. Mom, this is ridiculous. You need to stop. Violet shot him a stern look. Stay out of this, Kevin. This is between Aiden, Ellie, and me. The visit only spiraled from there. Violet's continuous insinuations and sly remarks made the atmosphere suffocating. It felt as if she was deliberately trying to sow seeds of doubt in Aiden's mind. By the time we left, the air between Aiden and I was thick with unspoken tension. Back home, Aiden retreated into a shell of silence, his gaze lost to the void. I sat beside him, desperate for him to speak. Aiden, please talk to me, I pleaded. He turned to me, his eyes a turmoil of confusion and pain. Ellie, my mom's words, they're getting to me. I don't want to believe her, but you think I cheated on you? That I'm carrying someone else's child? I asked, my voice breaking under the strain of emotion. Aiden ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of deep turmoil. I don't know what to think anymore, Ellie. It's all just too much. A single tear rolled down my cheek. This time in our lives, which should have been filled with joy and anticipation, was being poisoned by Violet's malice. We went to bed surrounded by a heavy silence, the chasm between us widening. The day our son Mark was born should have been filled with nothing but happiness, yet the residue of the ongoing drama tinged it with apprehension. In the hospital, after hours of labor, I was exhausted, and Aiden seemed lost between joy and skepticism. When the nurse handed Mark to me, his tiny face, blonde hair, and bright blue eyes were angelic. He's beautiful, Ellie, Aiden whispered, though his voice betrayed his ongoing inner conflict. Yes, he is, I replied, trying to push aside the uneasy feeling brewing inside me. When Violet and Kevin visited, the tension escalated. Violet's eyes narrowed as she took in Mark's features. Well, isn't he a surprise? Blonde and blue-eyed, she remarked cryptically. Aiden stiffened beside me, his discomfort palpable. Mom, what are you trying to imply? She just shrugged. Nothing. Just an observation. Kevin, cradling Mark, gave me a sympathetic glance. He's perfect, Ellie. But Violet's words lingered a veiled challenge that remained unspoken, yet deeply felt. This was not how I envisioned the early days of motherhood, surrounded by suspicion and conflict. I knew then that I had to do whatever it took to protect our little family and somehow heal the rifts that Violet's accusations had deepened. The comment from Violet left the room icy with tension. It's all strange, isn't it? You both have dark hair, and here we have a little blondie, she remarked, glancing at Mark with skepticism. My cheeks flamed with anger, but I managed to reply, Violet, genetics can be surprising. My cousin has blonde hair too. It's perfectly normal. She just hummed noncommittally, her gaze piercing as she scrutinized me. After they left, the silence in our home grew heavy. Aiden sat quietly beside me while Mark slept peacefully in his crib. "Aiden, please," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Don't let your mom's suspicions poison your thoughts." He looked from Mark to me, his expression troubled. "I know, Ellie. It's just, everything she's been saying makes it hard." I reached for his hand, needing to feel the connection. "Look at me, Aiden. I've never lied to you. I've never betrayed you. He's your son." Aiden nodded slowly, his eyes sad. "I know, Ellie, I do. It's just my mom. She knows how to get to me." That night, the tension was almost tangible. Aiden held Mark, looking down at him with a mix of love and, possibly, doubt. "Aiden, we need to move beyond this," I said firmly. "We're a family now. We can't let your mom destroy that." He nodded. "You're right. I'll talk to her. I'll make things clear." But even as he spoke, I knew resolving this wouldn't be simple. Violet's seeds of doubt had taken root, and they were suffocating the life out of our relationship. Over the next few weeks, our home felt like a tightrope walk. Every conversation, every glance, every gesture loaded with tension and silent questions. It was a chilly evening, one that should have found us cuddled together, yet Aiden paced the room restlessly while Mark slept, oblivious to the storm around him. Suddenly, Aiden stopped and faced me, his expression hard, his voice even harsher. "Ellie, I can't take this anymore. We're doing a DNA test for Mark." My heart dropped. "A DNA test? Are you out of your mind, Aiden?" His face was set, resolute. "It's not just about us, Ellie. I want Kevin to take the test too." That statement hit me like a physical blow. "Kevin? Your brother? You seriously think?" Aiden interrupted, firm and unyielding. "You've heard my mom. There are doubts, Ellie, and they're consuming me." I was shaking with fury. "So, your mom's irrational fears are driving this? What happened to trusting your wife?" His reply was icy. "This isn't just about trust. It's about certainty. I need to know for sure." Tears welled up as I countered. "And if I say no, what then, Aiden's?" His answer was chilling. "If you refuse, you and Mark can't stay. I need to sort this out, and I can't do that with you here." I stared at him, disbelief and anger warring within me. "You'd kick out your wife and son just like that?" He wouldn't meet my gaze. "That's the way it has to be, Ellie." I spent a restless night consumed by anger and despair. The next morning, I confronted Aiden again, hoping he had come to his senses. Holding Mark in my arms, I pleaded, "Aiden, we need to talk. You can't be serious about this." Aiden was distant, resolute. "I've thought it over, Ellie. The test happens or you leave. That's final." I couldn't hold back my tears. "This is insane, Aiden. You're letting your mother's paranoia come between us." He remained unmoved. "It's not about choosing sides. It's about finding the truth." I was aghast at how far Violet's influence had reached, threatening to shatter our family under the weight of her baseless suspicions. As the weight of Aiden's doubts pressed heavily on us, it became painfully clear that our marriage was faltering under the strain. "What about us, Aiden? What about our marriage?" I asked him, desperation seeping into my voice. Aiden sighed, his eyes clouded with a mixture of regret and confusion. "I don't know, Ellie. Right now, I just need answers." With a heavy heart, I packed our bags. Mark, innocent and unaware, continued to play as I struggled to hold back tears. We moved to my mom's place temporarily. Once there, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "He's making us take a DNA test, Mom. He's lost his mind," I vented, tears streaming down my face. My mom wrapped her arms around me, her voice tinged with anger and disbelief. "That boy is throwing away his family over some nonsense. You're better than this, Ellie." "I don't even recognize him anymore." I sobbed into her shoulder. She held me tight, her support unwavering. "You're strong, Ellie. You'll get through this. We'll get through this together." The doubts Aiden harbored not only tore our family apart, but also eroded the love and trust that once bound us. Now, I was left facing a future riddled with uncertainties, a single mother with a shattered heart, trying to make sense of the wreckage. After days of agony, I gave in to Aiden's demand for a DNA test. It felt like surrendering to a storm, but I saw no other choice. From my mom's house, I called Aiden to inform him of my decision. "Aiden, I'll do the damn test," I said, my voice as steady as I could manage. There was a pause on the other end before he replied, "Okay, I'll arrange it." And Kevin agreed to do it too. I clenched my phone tighter, anger and resignation mixing within me.
Fine.
Let's just get this over with. A week later, the results were in. My heart pounded as we gathered at the clinic. Aiden, Kevin, Violet, and Violet, who had insisted on being there, wore a smug look as if she had already won. Aiden, his hands trembling, opened the envelope handed to him by the nurse. We all held our breath as he read. Finally, Aiden looked up, his face unreadable. "I'm the father. Mark is my son." Relief washed over me, and I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. "I told you, Aiden. I told you," I said, though my voice was more tired than triumphant. Violet's face morphed into a picture of shock and disbelief. "But how?"
I was so sure, she stammered.
"Yeah, you were sure," Kevin interjected, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Sure about ruining our family with your paranoia." Aiden just sat there, the results in his hands, looking utterly lost. "I don't know what to say," he murmured. Furious tears streamed down my face. "You want to say something now? After you put us through hell?" Aiden reached out, but I pulled away.
"Don't, Aiden."
"Just don't." Kevin stood, his anger palpable. "I can't believe you did this, Aiden. You and Mom. You two deserve each other." Violet tried to intervene, but Kevin cut her off.
"No, Mom.
"You've done enough. I'm done with this." With those words, he walked out, leaving Aiden and Violet sitting there, confronted by the proof of their unfounded doubts. As for me, I felt empty inside. The test had vindicated me, but at what cost? My marriage, my trust in Aiden, it had all been torn apart. I walked out of that clinic knowing that things would never be the same. The day of reckoning had come. I decided it was time to bring everything out into the open. I invited Aiden, his brother Kevin, and their mother Violet to my mom's house for one final confrontation. The atmosphere was charged as they walked in. "Thanks for coming," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's a lot we need to discuss." Violet sat down with her usual sour expression, stiff and defensive. "Well, I'm here. Let's hear it." Aiden seemed uncomfortable as he shifted in his seat across from me. "Ellie, I've been thinking. Maybe we can just forget all this happened and start over. You know?" His suggestion, hopeful yet naive, made me scoff inwardly. "Forget," I replied, incredulity edging my tone. "Oh, Aiden, you have no idea." From beneath the table, I pulled out the divorce papers and placed them abruptly in front of him. His expression morphed from surprise to confusion. "Divorce? Why, Ellie? I thought we could work through this," he stammered, clearly caught off guard. That's when I revealed the final blow, a folder filled with photographs. I tossed it across the table to him. As Aiden thumbed through the photos, his complexion turned ghostly pale. Each picture showed him getting uncomfortably close to another woman. He opened his mouth to speak but faltered, finding no words. Violet, unable to resist, snatched the photos, her eyes widening in disbelief. "This doesn't prove anything. She's not right for you anyway, Aiden," she insisted, her denial thick in the air. I was livid. "Oh, it proves a lot, Violet. It shows Aiden's hypocrisy. He accused me of cheating, and yet here he is, the real cheater." Kevin, who had been quietly observing, finally let his disgust show. "I can't believe you, Aiden. All this time, you were pointing fingers at Ellie, and you are the guilty one." Aiden attempted to explain. "It's not what it looks like." Kevin cut him off sharply. "Save it, Aiden. I'm done with this. With you. With Mom's manipulations." He stood, his decision clear, and headed for the door. Violet reached for him desperately. "Michael, please," but Kevin shrugged her off.
"No, Mom."
"You and Aiden have gone too far this time. With that, he left, his departure leaving a heavy silence behind. Violet, still clutching the photos, turned to Aiden. You can do better than her. You'll see. But Aiden, still reeling from the revelations, remained silent, a picture of betrayal and guilt. I faced them. My resolve hardened. You've both made your beds. Now you can lie in them. I'm done being part of this toxic mess. Violet opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand, stopping her. No, Violet. There's nothing left to say. You've lost a daughter-in-law and a son today. I hope it was worth it. As they left, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness wash over me. I turned to my mom, who had been a steadfast pillar of strength through the ordeal. It's over, Mom. Just us now. She hugged me tightly. You did the right thing, Ellie. We're here for you always. After the dust settled, the divorce was finalized. The court granted me alimony and compensation for Aiden's betrayal. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things, but it felt like justice. One day, Violet showed up at my doorstep, desperation and guilt etching her features. Ellie, I need to see Mark. He's my grandson. I stood in the doorway, blocking her path. Not a chance, Violet. After everything you've done, you think you have the right to see him? She tried to push past me, but I stood firm, an unyielding guardian to the new peace I had fought so hard to secure. Standing my ground firmly at the doorway, I faced Violet with an unyielding resolve. I'm his grandmother, Ellie. You can't keep me from seeing him, she argued desperately. Watch me, I replied coldly. You lost that right when you tore this family apart. Violet's expression contorted with anger as she accused me of being unreasonable. Unreasonable? No, Violet. To us, you're no longer family, I countered sharply. Her departure was lonely and defeated. Later, I learned that Kevin had moved away from the city, severing ties with both Violet and Aiden. He couldn't bear the destruction their actions had wrought on what was once a loving family. As for Aiden, he made several attempts to reconnect, but I dismissed each one. You have your mother to thank for this mess, I told him curtly during one of his calls. Don't bother calling again. Left alone, Aiden was forced to face the consequences of his decisions, with only Violet's company, who he now blamed for everything that had gone wrong. Life gradually moved forward. I concentrated on raising Mark and advancing my career, rebuilding our lives piece by piece. My mother was a steadfast source of support, aiding me in navigating the challenges of single motherhood. One quiet evening, while Mark was asleep and I savored a cup of tea, my mother sat beside me. You did the right thing, Ellie. It wasn't easy, but it was the right decision, she reassured me. I nodded in agreement, feeling the weight of our past struggles. It's just us now, but we're stronger for it. The betrayal, the lies, and the heartache were now behind us. Ahead lay a future filled with hope and the promise of something better. Aiden and Violet had become part of a past best left forgotten. This was our time, our opportunity to start anew, and I was ready to embrace it fully, confident in the strength and resilience that my mother and I shared. Life had always been quite predictable for me as a fitness trainer at a community gym. My daily routine involved assisting clients with their fitness goals, which kept me occupied and content, away from any personal dramas. However, everything shifted when Liam entered the gym. Hi, I'm looking to change my workout routine. Do you have any challenging exercises to start with? He inquired with a casual tone, yet his intense gaze suggested he was not just any gym goer. Unlike beginners who often hesitated around gym equipment, Liam appeared experienced and seemed to be seeking something beyond a regular workout. I guided him to the weights area and said, "Let's see what you can handle." That initial training session evolved into a regular schedule, and our brief conversations gradually became deeper, more intimate exchanges. Liam owned a quaint family restaurant renowned for its authentic Italian cuisine. "It's all in the sauce," he would boast, "and no one does it like my mom." He spoke of his mother with a blend of respect and mild exasperation, revealing deep family connections. One day, After an especially vigorous workout, Liam surprised me by asking, "Susan, how about dinner at my place? You can meet my mom and taste that famous sauce." Taken aback yet intrigued, I accepted his invitation. The dinner was delightful, the food was exceptional, and the atmosphere was unexpectedly cozy. His mother, Doris, was incredibly welcoming, her laughter hearty, although her eyes seemed to study me closely. Liam's sister, Ashley, also joined us, her demeanor slightly abrasive, her comments sharp. "So, Susan, Liam tells us you're quite the fitness expert," she remarked with a sly grin, sizing up my physique. "Ever deal with hopeless cases? Or do you only improve the already fit?" I responded with a smile. "I believe everyone has potential. It's about finding the right motivation." Liam was a constant fixture in those early days. He always arrived at the gym at the same time, often lingering to chat a bit longer. "You know, I never really believed in fate or anything," he confessed one evening as we were closing the gym. "But meeting you, maybe I was wrong." His words were genuine, a blend of earnest awkwardness and charm. Despite my inner caution urging me to proceed slowly, I was falling for him, quickly and deeply, like a novice lifting too much weight without a spotter. On a cool evening, as we walked to our cars, Liam stopped, turned to me with a serious look, and said, "Susan, I'm not great at fancy speeches, and I don't have any slick lines, but I like you a lot. What do you say we make this official?" His approach was direct, with no pretenses, just straightforward honesty. I couldn't help but smile, my heart pounding with excitement. Yes, let's see where this journey takes us. And just like that, I was no longer just a fitness trainer. I was Liam's girlfriend and soon his wife. Moving into Liam's mother's house shortly after our wedding wasn't the fairy tale ending I had envisioned. But for Liam, it was important. From the moment I moved in with Liam's family, life became increasingly challenging. Living with his mother Doris and sister Ashley was difficult, as they openly expressed their disapproval of me joining the family, and the tension escalated daily. The house was always lively, yet I somehow found myself burdened with an overwhelming amount of chores, especially after exhausting days at the gym. I'd return home to a never-ending list of tasks, with the old washing machine becoming my nemesis due to its frequent breakdowns. It seemed to have a personal vendetta against me, yet no one else seemed to notice or care, particularly not Doris or Ashley. I remember one evening while wrestling with the malfunctioning machine post-dinner, I overheard them mocking me in the kitchen. "She doesn't even know what she's doing." Ashley's laughter was clear and unreserved. "Watch. She'll flood the basement next." Their laughter stung more than I cared to admit. Despite the hurt, I focused on fixing the machine, refusing to let their words affect me. The difficulties extended beyond chores. Cooking was a particular sore point. Italian cuisine held a sacred place in their home, and my attempts to master it were met with disdain. Following Doris's recipes precisely never seemed to pan out. One night, as I grappled with what should have been a straightforward pasta dish, Ashley watched from the doorway, her smirk evident. "Is that supposed to look like that?" she quipped. "It's nothing like Mom's." I stirred the stubborn sauce, frustration simmering. "Well, I'm trying my best here." Ashley's response was cutting. "Maybe your best isn't good enough."
Did you ever think of that?
I felt isolated, with Liam often withdrawing further each time his mother or sister criticized me. He never defended me. His silence felt as harsh as their mocking laughter. At times, he would murmur, "Hey, Susan, just leave it. It's not worth it," trying to avoid confrontation. Mealtimes felt like navigating a lion's den. I would set the dishes on the table, hoping for a peaceful meal, but the atmosphere was anything but. "You know, in Italy, they'd probably ban you from the kitchen for this," Doris would joke as she tasted my food, the others joining in with chuckles. "Yeah, maybe stick to gym stuff," Ashley would add, her comment like a backhanded peace offering I apparently didn't deserve. I would nod, smile, and swallow the hurt, my frustration simmering like the sauce that never seemed right. The challenges of living with Liam's family were exacerbated when I became pregnant. The chores, already predominantly my responsibility, became even more demanding. Instead of offering help or understanding, Doris and Ashley's hostility seemed to intensify. One afternoon, as I vacuumed the living room slowly due to my growing belly, Doris watched me for a moment before sighing dramatically, a sound heavy with disapproval. "Susan, you missed a spot over there. And look at how slow you're moving. This house is going to fall apart at this rate," she pointed out, indicating a corner I hadn't reached yet. Straightening up, feeling the strain in my back, I replied, "I'm doing the best I can, Doris. It's a bit harder with the baby." She just stared and shook her head, unimpressed by my efforts. This ongoing struggle within the household was a daily battle I was unprepared for, testing my resilience and patience at every turn. Despite the physical and emotional demands of pregnancy, my need for understanding was often dismissed. "You need to toughen up," was a common refrain around the house, which left me biting my tongue to keep from retaliating. Ashley's lack of empathy was just as challenging. One day, while I was folding laundry, she barged into the room and criticized my work. "You do know these aren't folded right, don't you? They should be able to stand up on their own like how Mom taught us." She then proceeded to undo the neat stack I had made, refolding a shirt with precise, sharp movements. My frustration mounted. "Ashley, I appreciate the lesson, but I've folded clothes before." "I'm not an idiot," I said, trying to keep my composure. Her response was a cold, dismissive smile. "Could have fooled me. But hey, if you're okay with being mediocre, who am I to argue?" Her words stung like a physical slap, leaving me feeling helpless and undervalued. This pattern extended to the kitchen, where every meal I prepared was subject to criticism or outright ridicule, especially if I dared attempt Italian cuisine. One evening, determined to make a simple pasta dish, I was stirring the pot when Ashley entered. "What's that supposed to be?" she asked skeptically. "It's spaghetti carbonara." "I thought it might be nice for dinner," I replied, hopeful for a softer reaction. She sampled it with an exaggerated grimace. "Nice? This is what you call nice? I wouldn't feed this to a dog. It's all wrong." Frustrated, I responded more firmly than usual. "Well, it's what's for dinner. If you don't like it, feel free to make something else." The tension in the household only escalated from there, exacerbated by Liam's frequent absences. He was always busy at the restaurant, and on the rare occasions he was home, he avoided confrontations. When I expressed how his sister and mother's behavior affected me, he would simply sigh and say, "I know it's tough, Susan, but try to hang in there. They'll warm up to you eventually. Just give it time." Hope that the birth of my son might improve relations proved futile. The extra weight I had gained during pregnancy became their new fodder for mockery. "Look at how much she's eating," Doris would laugh as I tried to nourish myself for breastfeeding. "Are you feeding a child or a small army?" One particularly painful day, while nursing my son in the living room, I heard Ashley mimic a cow's moo from the kitchen. The sound cut deep, bringing tears to my eyes. It was clear they viewed me merely as a utility for my child. Reaching my breaking point, I realized I needed to carve out something just for myself, a space where I wasn't just the criticized daughter-in-law or the underappreciated wife. That's when I decided to start my own YouTube channel and Instagram page. One morning, while Liam was at the restaurant and Ashley was out, I set up my old camera in the corner of our cramped guest room, now my makeshift gym. "I'm doing this for me, not for them," I muttered to myself, adjusting the camera angle. This was my stand to reclaim some independence and respect, 2 videos at a time. I began creating straightforward workout videos targeted at people like me, busy moms who often couldn't make it to the gym. At first, it felt strange to talk to a camera, pretending I was reaching an audience that might be interested in what I had to say. Despite the initial awkwardness, these recordings quickly became my sanctuary. My early attempts were rough, with hesitant introductions like, "Hey everyone, it's Susan here with a quick 15-minute workout perfect for busy moms. Let's get started." As my follower count increased, so did my confidence. I upgraded to a better camera and picked up tips on lighting and editing from online tutorials. My small project was evolving into something significant and wholly personal. One afternoon, while I was filming a low-impact cardio sequence, Ashley stormed into the room. "What the hell are you doing?" she demanded, eyeing the camera setup disdainfully. turning our home into your personal TV show now." I paused the recording, my heart racing not from the exercise but from the confrontation. "Yes, I am. It's something important to me, something that's mine," I responded. Ashley scoffed and surveyed the room with contempt. "You think you're some kind of star? Please, get over yourself, Susan." Although her words stung, I was learning to handle her scorn. "Well, it's not like I have your approval for anything else around here. I might as well do something I enjoy," I retorted. She rolled her eyes and left, but I quickly resumed recording, my voice firmer than before. As my digital presence grew, so did the opportunities. Brands began reaching out, offering free products for me to feature in my videos, and soon I received offers for sponsored posts. The first time a brand paid me for a feature, I was astounded. "I can't believe they're paying me for this," I exclaimed to Liam over dinner one night, hoping to share my excitement. "That's great, Susan," he replied, though distracted by troubles with his restaurant. "Just keep it quiet, okay? Mom and Ashley don't need to know about this." As I cleared the dinner plates, a notification pinged on my phone, a new comment, another follower, another step away from disdain, and towards something uniquely fulfilling. "You're doing amazing, Susan. Thanks for sharing your journey," the comment read. My channel was no longer just a hobby. It was a growing business, now generating more income than Liam's struggling restaurant. I began contributing $3,000 a month to help with household expenses, making it appear as if it was still Liam's contribution. Despite my success, Doris and Ashley continued to view me as a freeloader, sneering about my silly videos when they thought I couldn't hear. "She does nothing around here, just prances about making her silly videos," Doris would snipe. Ashley echoed her disdain, criticizing that I should be doing more traditional housework like a real woman. When Liam's restaurant hit a financial crisis, he approached me, looking more worn than ever. "The restaurant needs a cash injection badly. Can you help out?" he pleaded. Without hesitation, I transferred $15,000 for what he called urgent improvements. He was genuinely thankful, but it wasn't long before he sheepishly asked for another $6,000 for monthly bills. I agreed because I could afford it, despite the complex dynamics at home. Despite my efforts to support our family financially, I could feel an unsettling imbalance growing, not just in our finances, but also in our relationship. The tension in Liam's family home, which had always been strained, escalated to unbearable levels when Ashley married and her husband, Arthur, moved in. The already crowded house left little room for privacy, and any peace I had managed to carve out for myself and my son quickly evaporated. Doris, never one to hold back her harsh opinions, began calling me lazy and parasitic to my face. "You do nothing around here," she would snap as I juggled managing my online business with looking after my son. "Just taking up space." The situation worsened when Ashley announced her pregnancy, and Doris made it painfully clear that they needed more room, implying that my son and I were just in the way. "Soon there'll be another baby in the house, and we can't have freeloaders taking up space," Doris declared one evening, her gaze cutting into me. Then, as if the mounting home pressures weren't enough, Liam announced he needed to leave town for a few weeks to address urgent matters with his restaurant in another city. He packed and left after a quick goodbye, seemingly oblivious to the storm he was leaving behind. I continued my routine, taking my son to school and filming my videos in the park, trying to maintain some normalcy. However, the day everything fell apart started like any other, until it wasn't. Returning home from school with my son, we were shocked to find our belongings, suitcases, bags of clothes, even my son's toys, piled up outside the front door. Confused and heartbroken, I rang the doorbell, only to be met by the cold, unyielding faces of Doris and Ashley through the window. They opened the door just a crack, enough to speak but not to let us in. "You need to find somewhere else to stay," Doris stated, her voice harsh and firm. "What are you talking about? What about Liam? What will I tell him?" I demanded, my voice rising in panic and anger. Ashley laughed cruelly. "Tell him whatever you want. He's not here to care, is he?" Unable to reach Liam and my calls going unanswered, I was plunged into despair and fury. With no other options, I gathered our things and managed to secure a room at a nearby hotel. Sitting in that impersonal room with my confused and upset son, I felt a profound shift within me. This was no temporary retreat. It was a forced eviction from a life I could no longer tolerate. As I was unpacking our essentials, my phone pinged with a new message from Ashley, which was odd given our strained communication. Her message was unnervingly cheerful. Thought you might want to see what your beloved husband has been up to, accompanied by a link. With my curiosity piqued and anxiety tightening my chest, I clicked the link. It redirected me to a social media page filled with photos of Liam, not on an urgent business trip as he had claimed, but enjoying cozy dinners and beachside walks with another woman. The timestamp on the latest photo was just from yesterday. Numb and in shock, the phone nearly slipped from my hand as the reality hit me. Liam wasn't just away on business. He was living a whole other life without us. A sharp, bitter anger began to bubble up inside me as I faced the deceit and betrayal head-on. Before I could be consumed by my rage and heartbreak, my son's small voice pulled me back from the brink. "Mommy, are you okay?" His concern was evident, his eyes wide and worried. I forced a smile, lifting him into my arms. "Yeah, buddy, I'm okay. Just a little tired, that's all." As I sat there, anger and betrayal swirling inside me, I reflected on how I had become the financial pillar for Liam's failing restaurant and for his family, who had unceremoniously tossed us out like we were nothing. And there he was, living a lavish second life on my dime. Over the following week, my phone was a constant buzz with calls from Liam. When I finally picked up, his voice held a trace of concern. "Susan, where are you guys? I heard about what happened. You should come back. We have bills to sort out and the restaurant needs more funding." His words ignited a fury within me, but I managed a neutral tone. "Sure, Liam. We can discuss it. I'll come by tomorrow." He sounded relieved, thinking everything was going to settle into the old patterns.
Great.
"I think it's best to handle these things in person." Hanging up, a cold determination took hold of me. He was clueless about my awareness of his affair and my resolve to not play the part of the forgiving, financially supportive wife any longer. Tomorrow's meeting would be a decisive moment, and I was fully prepared for it. Dropping my son off at school, the next morning felt like the calm before the storm. As I drove to the house, where I knew Liam, Doris, and my pregnant sister-in-law, Ashley, would be waiting, my stomach churned with nerves and resolve. Upon arrival, Liam seemed genuinely relieved and perhaps even happy to see me, unlike Doris and Ashley, whose faces displayed clear discontent. Without delay, I pulled out the divorce papers from my bag and handed them to Liam. His shock was evident as he scanned the document. Doris and Ashley initially smiled, mistaking this for their triumph. However, their smiles quickly vanished as I addressed them firmly. "Don't be too quick to celebrate. You've been living off my efforts all this time." Liam's expression sank as he confessed to them that the restaurant was floundering and had been for a long time. Their initial glee turned to anger as they scolded him for keeping them in the dark and jeopardizing what they considered their financial safety net. Ashley, ever bold, sneered at me. "Well, since Liam makes less than you, he'll just have to file for alimony. How's that for justice?" Liam nodded as if agreeing to some perverse victory. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. "That's where you're wrong, Ashley and Liam," I retorted, facing him squarely. "You won't see a cent for alimony. I know about the affair." The color drained from his face. "How did you? Your sister sent me everything. Pictures, dates, places," I said, nodding toward Ashley, whose face turned ashen. "Thanks to her, I have all the evidence I need." What followed was a furious exchange among them, a cacophony of accusations and denials. I let them drown in their quarrel for a moment before speaking up again. "I'm also taking back everything I paid for, every appliance, every piece of furniture." Their arguing ceased as the reality of the situation dawned on them. I had arranged for movers, and as they began hauling away the refrigerator, the washing machine, and the flat-screen TV, the finality of my departure became undeniable. As I watched the movers haul away even the top-tier blender I had presented last Christmas, Doris and Ashley's tear-streaked faces mirrored their shock. "You can't take these things away. We need them," Doris exclaimed, her voice tinged with anguish. My response was calm but firm. "I've made this decision, and I need them as well." The movers efficiently cleared out a significant portion of their home's contents. Observing the final items being taken away, I felt a profound sense of liberation. I was finally freeing myself from this household, these relationships, and their deceit. Turning to look at Liam, he appeared diminished, his aspirations for quick wealth fading. "Look after your sister and mom, Liam. That's now your role," I said softly, yet with resolve, before I turned to depart. Walking away, I realized this moment marked more than a mere physical departure. It was my definitive escape from their manipulative clutches, a step toward a fresh start for my son and me. The divorce, which came as a respite rather than a hardship, allowed me to secure a fair division and alimony for our son due to Liam's cheating. My lawyer managed the divorce efficiently, making the difficult process as smooth as possible. Life, however, grew more challenging for Liam's family. His restaurant, unsupported by my financial aid, collapsed. Their house was sold to cover debts, a stark reminder of their unsustainable habits. Doris and Ashley reached out in desperation, their messages a blend of apologies and requests for help. But I was determined not to be drawn back into their disorder. I blocked their numbers with no hesitation. Ashley's husband deserted her, leaving her and her family, Liam, his mother, and her niece, squeezed into a cramped rental. Their predicament was of their own making. Meanwhile, life for my son Terry and me was improving. We settled into a cozy apartment that felt increasingly like home. My social media platforms, where I engage with women, especially new mothers seeking to regain their fitness, were flourishing. This prompted me to start online fitness programs tailored for postpartum women, thrilled by the prospect of aiding others who had faced similar struggles. With so much ahead, the future seemed bright and full of potential. In our new home, filled with my son's joyful laughter, I felt a deep and enduring peace. We had overcome the tumult, and now it was our time to thrive. My name is Lisa, and I once believed I had everything neatly in place. I held a prestigious position as the head of marketing, shared a loving relationship with my husband, Ethan, and enjoyed a stable, comfortable life. Financially independent, I took pride in handling our mortgage payments on my own, which added to my sense of achievement. The family was central to our existence. Ethan's younger brother, Brian, and their mother, Amy, were constants in our lives. Having lost their father years earlier, the brothers were devoted to their mother, which I admired deeply. It was heartwarming to see, and it made me appreciate Ethan even more for his dedication to his family. Amy initially seemed to approve of me. During family gatherings, she would engage me in conversations about my job, often remarking with a nod, "Marketing, huh? Sounds important." It was reassuring to feel accepted and valued by Ethan's family, and I was eager to integrate fully into their close-knit circle. Our early years of marriage were filled with joyful weekends, holiday meals, and spontaneous family game nights. I recall one particularly lively Thanksgiving at Amy's, where the laughter and chatter filled the room, creating a warm, inclusive atmosphere. It felt right to belong to this family. However, a shift occurred during a New Year's Eve celebration at Amy's. While refilling my wine glass in the kitchen, I accidentally overheard a conversation that would start to change my perspective. Amy was mockingly commenting on Julie's inexpensive dress in the living room, suggesting that Julie, a single mother doing her best, was out of her depth trying to play with the big boys. This incident made me question the nature of the family dynamics I had admired. The teasing I had once dismissed as harmless took on a more malicious tone over time. Amy frequently gathered with Ethan and Brian to whisper and laugh at the expense of others, making snide remarks about various family members and friends. It felt increasingly uncomfortable to witness. On one Easter Sunday, I reached my limit. Amy was in the living room, casually critiquing another relative's financial decisions, when I couldn't hold back any longer. Standing up, I confronted her about the rudeness of her remarks, hoping to defend those who were being subtly bullied. The room fell silent, and Amy, with a sharp tone of sarcasm, dismissed my concerns, suggesting I was too sensitive. At that moment, I looked to Ethan for support, hoping he would stand by me. The realization that my once beloved family gatherings had a hidden undercurrent of meanness was disheartening, and it prompted me to reevaluate the dynamics of the family I had once so eagerly wanted to be a part of. After Ethan's disappointing reaction, family gatherings morphed into an ordeal for me. I would often find myself isolated, sipping on a drink while Ethan remained glued to his mother's side. He would occasionally send apologetic looks my way, but never did he join me to offer the support I needed. One evening, after enduring another difficult dinner, I confronted him. "Why can't you ever stand up to her?" I asked, the frustration evident in my voice. Ethan, looking weary, ran his hand through his hair. "She's my mother, Lisa. What do you expect me to do?" "I expect you to tell her she's being cruel. I expect you to stand by me," I insisted. But he never did, and as a result, I began to invent excuses to avoid these painful family events, citing sudden work crises or migraines, anything to escape the harsh whispers and cold stares. Just as I thought our situation couldn't become more strained, life threw a significant twist our way. I was pregnant. Discovering the pregnancy left me with a mix of emotions, holding the test with shaking hands and calling out for Ethan, who came rushing, concern painting his features. When I showed him the test, his reaction, a mixture of shock and relief, pulled me into a brief hope that perhaps this new life might mend the growing fissures between us. However, the pregnancy proved to be anything but easy. I faced constant nausea and dizziness, with the looming threat of miscarriage hovering over me, forcing me into bed rest and eventually quitting my job as my condition worsened and my eyesight began to deteriorate, a rare but potentially permanent complication. During this vulnerable time, I felt Ethan drifting further away, often returning home late, if at all, leaving me to face my challenges alone. The day of my scheduled C-section arrived sooner than expected due to my vision issues, making natural birth too risky. Lying on the operating table, filled with a blend of fear and anticipation, I asked for Ethan, only to be told by a nurse that he had chosen to wait outside. The surgery itself went smoothly, and hearing my son's first cries was a transcendent moment, filling me with an overwhelming rush of love. However, the joy was short-lived as Ethan eventually appeared in the recovery room, his discomfort and annoyance barely concealed. "Lisa, we need to talk. This isn't right," he began abruptly. His words, dismissing the necessity of my surgery and lamenting the presence of men during childbirth as against old norms, struck a deep chord of pain within me. As he stormed out, claiming the hospital environment was too much for him, I was left alone, reeling not only from his words but also from the reality of our situation. The subsequent weeks were a haze of sleepless nights and constant feedings, with Ethan's presence becoming rarer, leaving me to navigate the challenging waters of new motherhood by myself. Ever since our son was born, Ethan barely helped with his care and often complained. "Can't you shut him up?" he'd growl as our baby cried through the night. "I'm trying," I'd reply, my voice heavy with exhaustion. "He's teething, Ethan. It hurts him." But Ethan had no patience for it. "All you do is focus on the kid."
What about me?
What about our sex life? I was astonished by his lack of understanding and compassion, especially as I was still recovering from major surgery and running on minimal sleep. As the weeks turned into months, Ethan's dissatisfaction only grew. One evening, while I was trying to soothe our fussy 7-month-old, he bluntly stated, "You need to go back to work." I was shocked.
What?
"But the baby," I began. "We'll hire a nanny," he interrupted. "We can't keep living like this, Lisa. We need the money." Despite wanting to argue that our son needed me and that I wasn't ready to return to work, the resolute look in his eyes silenced me. With a heavy heart, I began job hunting. Finding work with my compromised vision was challenging. I eventually secured a position at a smaller company, although the pay was less than before. When I informed Ethan, his response was predictably dismissive. "That's it," he scoffed. "We're paying a nanny for this? Tears welled up in my eyes. "I'm doing my best, Ethan." "It's not easy with my eyesight," I pleaded. "Excuses," he muttered, walking away. This marked the beginning of my new reality. Rushing to work each morning, guilt gnawing at me as I left my baby with the nanny, struggling through the day with my limited vision, and then coming home to a resentful husband and a son who desperately needed my attention. Time passed in a blur of work, childcare, and escalating tension at home. Before I knew it, 3 years had gone by since my son's birth. Despite the difficulties, I cherished him deeply and found joy in his milestones. Family gatherings continued to be stressful, particularly because of Amy's behavior. She would perform the role of the doting grandmother when others were watching, but her disinterest was obvious. "Come to Grandma," she'd coo in a sweet voice, arms outstretched towards my son. Yet, he would cling to me, turning his face away from this woman he barely knew. Amy's expression would sour. "What have you been telling him about me?" she'd hiss accusingly. "You're turning my grandson against me." I'd try to explain, weary. "He just doesn't know you well, Amy. If you visited more often," but she would cut me off. "Don't you dare blame this on me," and storm off to complain to Ethan. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, my world was thrown off balance, once again. Holding a pregnancy test, my heart pounding, I saw the positive result. Fear enveloped me. My first pregnancy had been so fraught, my health so compromised. Could my body handle another? As I pieced together the timeline, I realized I was already well into my first trimester. The decision, it seemed, had been made without my full awareness. With trembling hands, I called Ethan at work to share the news. His response was terse. "What is it?" he asked, a note of impatience in his voice. "Ethan, I'm pregnant," I said, my voice faltering. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, dismissively, "Look, Lisa, I'm busy. We'll talk later. Just don't quit your job, all right? We can't afford that." The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone, feeling more isolated than ever. Thankfully, this pregnancy was less arduous than my first. The morning sickness was bearable, and my vision remained stable, allowing me to continue working. I was determined to support my growing family. However, as my belly grew, the distance between Ethan and me seemed to widen further. He increasingly spent his time at his mother's house, often returning home late. One evening, exhausted from managing our toddler and my pregnancy, I asked Ethan for help as he walked through the door. "Hey, can you read him a story?" "I'm exhausted," I said, hopeful for some assistance. Ethan glanced at us, then at his watch.
"Can't."
I promised Mom I'd help remove some furniture. "Don't wait up." And with that, he was gone, leaving me alone with our son and my tears. As my 7th month of pregnancy came around, I prepared for Thanksgiving. Guests began to arrive in the afternoon, including my parents who immediately pitched in. The house filled with the comforting buzz of chatter and laughter. Just before dinner, the doorbell rang again. It was Brian, Ethan's younger brother, and he wasn't alone. "Everyone, this is Christine," Brian announced, introducing his fiancée. The room's mood shifted to joyous congratulations. Amy arrived shortly after, her eyes lighting up at Christine. Throughout dinner, she showered Christine with attention, asking about her job as a manager at a national bank. "How prestigious," Amy gushed, clearly impressed. Then, in a louder voice meant for all to hear, Amy said, "Christine here makes $220,000 a month. Now that's the kind of daughter-in-law I've always dreamed of. Smart, beautiful, successful." Her words stung, especially as she threw a pointed look my way, adding, "Unlike some people who can only pop out babies and breed poverty." I felt my cheeks heat up with humiliation. My mother bristled beside me, ready to defend me, but I gently stopped her, not wanting to escalate the situation. "You know," Amy continued, her voice dripping with faux sweetness, "why don't we continue this lovely evening at that new restaurant downtown? My treat, of course." Before I knew what was happening, Amy, along with Ethan, Brian, and Christine, were heading out the door. Ethan didn't even glance back. The departure drained the festive spirit from the room, and soon, our other guests began to leave, offering thin excuses. Only my parents remained in their presence a silent support in the suddenly quiet house. But I declined their help, insisting that they too needed to rest. Once they left, I sank into the couch, overcome with tears. As the hours trickled by, my sobs echoed through the quiet house, my hand resting on my growing belly, lost in thoughts of how my life had spiraled to this point. It was nearing dawn when I heard the front door creak open. Ethan stumbled in, reeking of alcohol and cigarette smoke, without a word, heading straight to our bedroom. With trembling hands, I picked up my phone and scrolled through social media. There, captured in a series of photos, were Amy, Ethan, Brian, and Christine, all smiles at an upscale nightclub. The caption stung, "Best Thanksgiving ever with my real family." As my due date neared, a mix of excitement and anxiety filled me. The doctors had scheduled another C-section, given the short interval since my last. Despite trying to focus on the arrival of our new baby, doubts about Ethan clouded my thoughts. One cold winter afternoon, I noticed Ethan unpacking bags full of summer clothes. Confused, I asked, "What's all this?" "Just saw a good sale. Thought I'd update my wardrobe," he replied, avoiding my gaze. It didn't quite add up, but with the baby on the way, I pushed my suspicions aside. I had been saving diligently, ensuring we had enough for the mortgage, bills, and even a babysitter for our 4-year-old. Thankfully, my workplace had approved 3 months of unpaid leave. 5 days before my scheduled C-section, chaos erupted. I was resting when Ethan and Amy burst through the door, urgency in their steps. Following them to our bedroom, I found Ethan hurriedly packing the new clothes. "Ethan," I said, my voice rising with panic, "what are you doing?" "We're all going to Brian's wedding in Hawaii," he replied curtly. "But my C-section is in 5 days. Who's going to take care of our son?" I protested. "You'll manage." "You always do," Ethan said coldly, zipping up his suitcase. Before I could utter another word, he and Amy were out the door, leaving me in a stunned silence. Reality hit me like a tidal wave. Frantically, I checked our joint account, empty. All the money I had saved was gone. With shaking fingers, I called Ethan. "What?" he snapped when he finally answered. "The money. All our savings. Where is it?" I stammered. After a pause, his cold laughter filled my ear. "We needed it for Brian's wedding gift." "Don't be so greedy, Lisa." Then, the line went dead. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through my abdomen. Looking down, I saw a puddle forming at my feet. My water had broken. Panic gripped me as I realized the imminent risk to my previous C-section scar. Clutching my phone with one hand and my belly with the other, I dialed emergency services. The hospital was a whirlwind of activity, doctors shouting, machines beeping. I awoke hours later to the gentle beeping of monitors, my mother's tear-stained face hovering over me. "Lisa," she whispered, squeezing my hand, "you're okay? The baby's okay?" Slowly, the reality of what had happened set in. I had nearly lost my life. My baby had nearly been lost. 5 days after my emergency C-section, I was feeling surprisingly resilient, both physically and emotionally. The doctors were impressed with my recovery and promptly gave me the green light to head home. During this time, Ethan hadn't bothered to call once, not to check if I was alive, nor to inquire about his new son. At that moment, I realized our marriage had irrevocably broken down. I reached out to my parents, asking if I could stay with them temporarily. They immediately welcomed me and my boys, offering not just a place to stay, but the emotional support I desperately needed. As they doted on their grandsons, I took the opportunity to rest and start researching divorce lawyers while gathering necessary financial documents. A week after leaving the hospital, Ethan finally called. I ignored his first 5 calls, answering only on the 3rd attempt. "Where the hell are you? Why aren't you at home?" he demanded, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. Calmly, I replied, "I'm at my parents' house with our sons." "I filed for divorce, Ethan." His reaction was a mixture of disbelief and mockery. "Divorce? Are you kidding me? After everything I've done for you," he laughed bitterly. "Everything you've done?" I countered, anger rising. Like abandoning me right before I gave birth, or stealing our savings? Oh, get over it. He scoffed dismissively. I'll pay you back. No problem. In fact, I don't even want to see you again. Do you know why? Because I'm going to be rich. He rambled on about a job offer from Brian's new wife, Christine, who had promised to make him wealthy beyond belief through a new financial venture. You never believed in me, Lisa, he spat. You always held me back. Well, guess what? I'm free now.
And you?
You're just a loser who can't see potential when it's right in front of her. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly swift. Ethan didn't contest much. He returned the money he had taken and agreed to pay alimony. Since I had been the one making the mortgage payments, evidenced by years of bank statements, the judge awarded me the house without hesitation. The day I moved back into what was now my house, Ethan was there, packing his last belongings. He sneered as I entered with our baby and our toddler by my side. Enjoy this dump while you can, he jeered, carrying a box. I'll be in a mansion soon, swimming in cash. You'll see what you missed out on. As he left, a profound sense of relief washed over me. The house felt larger, brighter, and free from the shadow of his presence. A year and a half later, life had settled into a new rhythm for me and my boys. I had returned to work and found a balance between my career and motherhood. It wasn't always easy, but we were content, healthy, and thriving. Then one ordinary Tuesday, my phone buzzed with a news alert that made my jaw drop. Local banker exposed as fraud, leaves family in ruins. The article detailed a shocking scandal involving Christine, who had been running an elaborate con. She had persuaded Ethan, Brian, and Amy to invest in a non-existent financial company by taking out massive loans, leaving them facing financial ruin. They had even mortgaged Amy's house, investing every cent into this fictitious venture. Christine, it turned out, was not a banker at all. The office she had shown them was merely a short-term rental, a set piece in her grand deception. She vanished with millions, leaving behind nothing but forged documents and shattered dreams. To add insult to injury, I discovered they had also taken out an additional loan to fund Brian and Christine's extravagant wedding in Hawaii, the very event Ethan had abandoned us to attend. As I read through the shocking details, a mix of emotions swept over me: surprise, disbelief, and I must admit, a hint of vindication. The fallout was devastating. Unable to repay their enormous debts, they lost everything. Amy's house, their cars, and even their personal belongings were seized by creditors. They were left with nothing but overwhelming debt. I learned through the grapevine that Amy had resorted to working as a cashier, barely making enough to afford a small apartment and groceries. Ethan and Brian found themselves in dire straits, their dreams of affluence and success utterly destroyed. I felt a profound sense of relief that I had divorced Ethan when I did, sparing my children and myself from the financial ruin that engulfed my ex-husband's family. Just when I thought I had moved past these tumultuous events, my phone rang. It was Amy's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Lisa, Amy's voice came through, timid and unlike her usual commanding tone. We need your help, she pleaded, asking if they could stay with us. The children need their father and grandmother, she insisted. You can't turn your back on family in times like this. I took a deep breath, memories of past hurts flooding back. The Thanksgiving humiliations, being left alone while pregnant and on the brink of giving birth, and all the times they had belittled and dismissed me. Family? I replied, my voice firm. You weren't concerned about family when you left me alone, pregnant and in danger. You weren't concerned about family when you helped steal my savings. You weren't concerned about family when you insulted me. Amy attempted to interrupt, but I pressed on. I'm sorry for what you're going through, Amy, but I am not responsible for the choices you, Ethan, and Brian made. My priority is my children, and I cannot expose them to the instability you've brought upon yourselves. Please, do not contact us again. I ended the call and immediately blocked her number. As I set down the phone, a weight seemed to lift off my shoulders. It was finally, truly over. I'm Melissa, and I'd like to tell you about an experience that might resonate with others. It all began when I was introduced to Thomas by my cousin Anthony, who thought we'd be a great match. Thomas was quite charming, and his demeanor was genuinely engaging. We connected well, and after a year of dating, he proposed. I was ecstatic and eagerly anticipated our life together. Anthony often mentioned that Thomas and I were like a match made in heaven. Our wedding was a dream, beautiful and joyful, surrounded by our loved ones. Shortly after our nuptials, Thomas suggested we move in with his mother, Diana, to help her cope with the loss of her husband and to save money. Initially hesitant, I was eventually persuaded by Thomas's reasoning. Life with Diana started smoothly. She was kind, and we managed to get along well. I assisted around the house, trying to make our living arrangements comfortable for everyone. However, 7 months into our marriage, Thomas suggested that I quit my job to dedicate more time to household duties and to assist Diana more. I loved my job as an accountant, and his suggestion made me uneasy. Yet, after some persuasion, I resigned, believing it was the best decision for our family. Initially, I managed well, engaging in household chores and spending quality time with Diana, learning about her and the family's traditions. Despite missing my work, I believed the sacrifice was worthwhile for the sake of our family harmony. Thomas seemed pleased, and everything appeared to be going well. But as time passed, the dynamics began to shift. Diana's requests grew more frequent and demanding, and Thomas's attitude toward me changed. I increasingly felt viewed not as a partner or a family member, but more like a servant. One morning, as I prepared breakfast, Diana criticized the cleanliness of the living room, despite my having just cleaned it. Her tone was harsh, and when I tried to explain, she only snapped at me to be more thorough. Later that day, Diana complained to Thomas about my supposed negligence, urging him to address it. Frustrated and feeling cornered, I defended myself, but Thomas only echoed his mother, insisting I just do a better job. This experience has been challenging, and I've come to realize the importance of communication and respect in any living arrangement. While I continue to navigate these dynamics, I hope sharing my story helps others feel less alone and more empowered to speak up in similar situations. Living with Diana and Thomas was like walking a tightrope, with my every move scrutinized. Diana's sharp critiques and Thomas's evident disappointment hung over me constantly, making me feel as though I could never do enough to please them. One day, Diana decided on a whim to invite some friends over for lunch, giving me very little time to prepare. Without any regard for my plans, she demanded, "Melissa, I need you to serve lunch to my friends and make sure everything is perfect." As the guests arrived, I served them with a smile, though I couldn't shake the feeling of their judgmental eyes on me. "Is this your daughter-in-law, Diana? She seems a bit overwhelmed," one guest commented audibly. Diana responded with a subtle but cutting remark about my need to improve my household management skills. After the guests left, Diana didn't hesitate to express her displeasure to Thomas. "Melissa was so disorganized today, and her cooking was subpar," she complained. When Thomas confronted me, his face flushed with anger, I tried to defend my efforts, explaining I was doing my best under the circumstances. "That's not good enough. You need to do better," he retorted angrily, dismissing my efforts. The environment grew increasingly hostile. Diana's nitpicking escalated, and Thomas's temper became even more unpredictable. I began to dread the start of each day, fearful of the inevitable criticism. During a rare moment of respite, I tried to enjoy a book in the living room. Diana found me and sharply reminded me of the chores awaiting my attention. "No breaks until all the work is done," she commanded coldly. Later, when Thomas returned home, Diana quickly informed him of my brief pause, painting it as laziness. "You can't just sit around, Melissa. There's always work to be done," Thomas exploded. I explained it was just a short break, but he was unforgiving. "No more breaks. Just do your damn job," he yelled, diminishing me further. Feeling more like a captive than a member of the family, I longed for the independence I once enjoyed. 3 years into our marriage, our daughter Alice was born. She became my sanctuary, my joy amid the storm. I devoted myself to her, hoping to shield her from the turbulent atmosphere of our home. However, as Alice grew, so did Thomas's anger. One particularly harsh evening, he erupted over some minor disorder in the house. "Why is this place such a mess?" he thundered upon entering. I explained I had been busy with Alice all day, but he was relentless. "Your cleaning isn't good enough. You're useless," he shouted, and in his rage, he shoved me, causing me to fall and cry out in pain. Alice's cry of "Mommy," as she ran to my side, broke the tense air. Thomas commanded her to go to her room with a fierce tone, but she stood frozen, witnessing the scene in fright. At that moment, the reality of our situation became painfully clear, and I knew something had to change, for Alice's sake and mine. I started to stutter that night, asking in her shaky voice, "Mommy, are you all okay?" My heart shattered. "It's okay, baby. Mommy's okay," I reassured her, though the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. Her stutter lingered beyond that night, prompting me to seek help from a psychologist. Despite 3 years of sessions, her progress was minimal. It pained me deeply to see her struggle, a direct result of witnessing the chaos at home. Alice's silent observations of our home life worried me immensely. She was learning from Thomas's treatment of me, and the thought of her accepting this as normal, as what family life should be, terrified me. But I felt cornered. Thomas had made it clear repeatedly, everything, the house, the money, belonged to him. He had threatened that if I ever left or sought a divorce, he would take Alice from me. The fear of losing her, my beacon through the darkest days, forced me to endure the constant shouting, the pushing, and the pervasive fear. Staying silent seemed the only option to protect her. Then, one day, a call from my cousin Anthony broke the steady hum of tension. "Melissa, I have some bad news. Your mom passed away," he informed me softly. I hadn't seen my mother in years, as Thomas had forbidden any contact with her. Yet I knew I needed to attend her funeral, to say my final goodbyes. Approaching Thomas, I tried to maintain my composure. "Thomas, my mom passed away. I need to go to the funeral," I said, my voice trembling. Unmoved, he barely looked up from his newspaper. "No, you're not going anywhere. We don't have money for that," he dismissed coldly. Tears rolled down my cheeks as he cruelly denied my plea. "Thomas, please, she was my mom. I have to go," I implored, my voice breaking. But he was resolute. "No, and that's final. You stay here and take care of the house and Alice," he commanded, returning to his reading. Anger and sadness overwhelmed me, but a resolve within me grew. I knew I had to go, no matter his commands. That night, I gently woke Alice. "Sweetie, we're going on a little trip. Be very quiet, okay?" I whispered. "Okay, Mommy," she replied, her voice sleepy and confused. After ensuring everyone was asleep, I packed a small bag for us, took my savings, and quietly left the house with Alice. As we drove toward my hometown, my heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. We arrived early the next morning, tired but relieved to be away from Thomas, even temporarily. We checked into a small motel and rested a bit before the funeral. The service was split into 2 parts, one for family and another for the public. The family gathering was emotional. I hadn't seen my relatives in years, and it was a time of many tears and hugs. The relief of being with them was palpable. During the service, my phone rang. It was Thomas. In my haste, I accidentally hit the speaker button, and his furious voice filled the room. "Melissa, get your ass back home right now, or I swear to God, I'll file for divorce and take Alice away," he bellowed. The room went silent, all eyes on me, their expressions a blend of shock and sympathy. The reality of my situation was laid bare before my family, marking a turning point in my life. As Thomas's voice blared angrily through the phone speaker during my mother's funeral, my cheeks flamed with embarrassment. I quickly turned off the speaker and mumbled, "I'm at my mom's funeral, Thomas. We'll talk later," before hanging up. Throughout the rest of the service, a knot of shame and anger twisted in my stomach, and his words echoed in my ears, humiliating me in front of my family. Yet, amidst this turmoil, I found a strange sense of clarity. I couldn't continue living like this. After the service, my cousin Anthony approached with a concerned look. "Melissa, you can't go back to that. You deserve better," he insisted, slipping me a piece of paper with a lawyer's contact information. "Call this lawyer. He can help you." Holding the paper, I felt a mixture of fear and hope to stir within me. Maybe this was my opportunity for change. "Thank you, Anthony," I said, my voice thick with emotion. That night, back at the motel, sleep eluded me, but a spark of hope flickered to life inside me. For the first time in a long while, I felt empowered to alter my circumstances for both Alice's and my sake. The morning after the funeral, I awoke with new resolve. I couldn't let fear or Thomas's control dictate my life any longer. My mother had left me her house and some money, a lifeline, and a chance to start anew. With the lawyer's phone number in hand, I decided it was time to act. I took a deep breath and dialed. "Hello, Mr. Jerry, this is Melissa. I'd like to schedule a consultation," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course, Mrs. Melissa. Can you come in this afternoon?" he replied. "Yes, I'll be there," I confirmed, my voice a mix of fear and determination. After dropping Alice off at Anthony's, I headed to the lawyer's office. Despite the nerves, I felt ready to confront the future. Mr. Jerry welcomed me warmly. "Mrs. Melissa, tell me everything," he urged, his voice calm and reassuring. I shared my story, the years of control, the threats, and the violence. He listened attentively, jotting down notes. "We need solid evidence of the abuse, both physical and emotional," he advised. "Record everything. Keep a detailed journal." I nodded, a plan forming in my mind. "I'll do that. I'll record every incident and write down everything," I promised. After the meeting, I purchased a new smartphone, a small act of rebellion, and a step toward reclaiming my independence. I set it up with a secure passcode and tested the recording function. I needed to be prepared for anything. Feeling more equipped, I returned to Anthony's house to pick up Alice. She seemed happier and more relaxed than I'd seen her in months. "Ready to go home, sweeties?" I asked, hugging her. "Yes, Mommy," she replied with a smile. As we drove back to Thomas and Diana's house, a mix of dread and determination settled over me. I knew I was returning to a hostile environment, but this time, I was armed with a plan and a newfound strength. This time, I was prepared to stand my ground. As soon as I walked through the door, Diana was waiting, her expression one of clear disapproval. "Where the hell have you been, Melissa? Do you think you can just waltz in and out as you please?" she snapped. "I was at my mother's funeral, Diana." "I told Thomas," I responded, ensuring my voice remained steady. "Well, you're back now. Get to work. This house won't clean itself," she retorted, turning away with a dismissive huff. Taking a deep breath, I turned on my new phone and discreetly slipped it into my pocket, starting the recording. I was determined to document every harsh word and aggressive act. As I went about my chores, I carefully captured each encounter. When Thomas returned home, his fury was palpable. "Melissa, what the hell were you thinking, leaving like that without my permission?" he shouted. "I went to my mom's funeral, Thomas." "I had to go," I replied, my heart racing. "You don't do anything without my say-so. Do you hear me?" he yelled, his face red with anger. "Give me your phone and purse," he demanded. I handed him my old phone, grateful for my foresight. His attempts to intimidate me were not going to work anymore. I was quietly gathering evidence, building my case, and planning my escape. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat down with my journal. I meticulously wrote down everything that had occurred since my return, every insult, every threat. I felt a new sense of purpose, a determination to see this through. The following days were challenging. Thomas and Diana's hostility did not wane, but I continued to record and document their behavior, building my case piece by piece, readying myself for the fight ahead. During dinner one night, Diana resumed her usual tirade. "You're nothing but a disgrace, leaving the house without Thomas's permission." She sneered at me, her eyes filled with disdain. "Diana, don't insult me in front of my daughter," I responded, striving to keep my voice calm yet firm. Thomas's face flushed with anger. "How dare you raise your voice at my mother?" he bellowed, pushing me hard. I stumbled but managed to stay upright. He then raised his hand, his eyes alight with fury. "You live here on borrowed rights, Melissa. Don't forget that," he shouted. I took a deep breath, a strange calm overtaking me. "I want a divorce, Thomas," I stated clearly. His face turned an even deeper shade of red, and he screamed, "You belong to me. You'll be my property until death." This time, I wasn't scared. My phone was securely in my pocket, recording every word. For the first time, I felt a sense of control. Over the next week, I diligently continued to record every insult and threat from both Thomas and Diana. Each time they belittled or threatened me, I discreetly turned on my new phone's recorder. Diana was relentless. "You're worthless, Melissa. Can't even keep a house clean," she would sneer. I carefully noted everything in my journal. Every insult, every harsh word. It was all crucial for building my case. Thomas was no less harsh. "You think you're tough now? You'll never leave me. You're nothing without me," he would shout. But I remained calm, recording his tirades and adding them to my growing list of evidence. It was exhausting but necessary. One day, I caught Diana raging at me in the kitchen. "You're a disgrace to this family, Melissa. Leaving the house like that," she spat. I recorded her words, each one fueling my resolve even further. With every passing day, my resolve grew stronger. I was on a mission to gather all the evidence necessary to secure a safer future for Alice and myself. The week following my mother's funeral had been one of the toughest yet, filled with tension and hostility at home, but it had also instilled in me a newfound sense of purpose. Unable to bear the oppressive atmosphere any longer, I reached out to Mr. Jerry, my lawyer. "Mr. Jerry, it's Melissa. I've collected all the evidence. It's becoming unbearable here," I said, doing my best to keep my voice steady. "Melissa, your cousin has taken the initiative to hire a private investigator to look into your husband. The investigator has uncovered some significant information. Can you meet with him today?" Mr. Jerry replied. "Of course, I'll go right away," I responded, a mix of fear and anticipation coursing through me. Driving to meet the private investigator, I felt nervous yet determined. When I arrived, he greeted me with a grave expression. "Melissa, I've been investigating your husband's activities. He's involved in fraudulent schemes and has ties to criminal activities. The police have been monitoring him, but they lacked sufficient evidence until now," he explained, handing me a folder. "This folder has everything. Consider it your freedom folder," he stated. Grasping the folder with trembling hands, I felt the immense weight of its contents. "Thank you. This means everything to me," I managed to say, my voice quivering. I drove home, my mind swirling with the implications of the folder's contents for Alice and me. As I pulled into the parking lot, Thomas was waiting, his expression contorted with anger. "Where the hell have you been, Melissa? Get in the house now," he shouted, his eyes brimming with menace. A surge of fear washed over me, but I knew I had to remain composed. Instead of exiting the car, I quickly called Anthony. "I'm at home, and Thomas is furious. I have the evidence. Can you call the police?" I said, my voice trembling. "Stay in the car, Melissa." "I'll call them right now," Anthony replied. Thomas, seeing that I wasn't complying, yanked the car door open and dragged me out. "You don't listen. You think you can defy me?" he screamed, pulling me towards the house. At that moment, the police arrived, their lights flashing. I collapsed on the asphalt, overwhelmed by the tension, and burst into tears. The officers quickly intervened, separating Thomas from me and arresting him. They took the folder with the evidence, and I watched as they led him away, a mix of relief and disbelief washing over me. After the police took Thomas away, Diana stormed into the house, furious. "You ungrateful woman. We took you in, and this is how you repay us," she spat, her voice laced with venom. I remained silent, knowing that any response would be pointless. Quickly, I packed our belongings, with Alice clinging to my side, sensing the tension but remaining quiet. With our bags in hand, we walked out of that house, a profound sense of relief enveloping us. I rented a small apartment nearby. It was modest, but felt like a palace compared to the nightmare we had left behind. As the trial approached, Mr. Jerry was instrumental in preparing our case. He assured me that we had a strong case with the accumulated evidence, the recordings, the journal entries, and the documents provided by the private investigator. On the day of the trial, I entered the courtroom, a mixture of fear and hope stirring within me, but I held my head high, determined to fight for my and Alice's future. Mr. Jerry presented all the evidence, systematically. It was overwhelming to relive everything, but I knew it was necessary to finally break free. When the judge finally spoke, I held my breath, waiting for the verdict that would determine our future. Based on the evidence presented, I grant the divorce and full custody of the child to Mrs. Melissa, the judge declared. He continued, the defendant is also ordered to provide financial compensation for moral and physical damages and to pay alimony for life. Because Thomas and Diana were unable to pay the compensation, they were forced to sell their house. Thomas was also sentenced to 6 years in prison for his fraudulent activities and the abuse he had inflicted. Back at home, I gently explained the outcome to Alice in terms she could understand. "Are we safe now, Mommy?" she asked, her eyes wide with hope. "Yes, Alice. We're safe and we're free to live our lives the way we want," I replied, my voice choked with emotion as tears of joy streamed down my face. After the trial, we moved back to my hometown, into my late mother's house. It felt like returning home after a long, dark journey. The house, filled with memories, brought a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. My cousin Anthony helped me secure a job at a local charity that supports women in difficult situations. It felt rewarding to use my experience to help others who had faced similar struggles. Alice quickly adapted to our new life. Freed from Thomas and Diana's toxic influence, she blossomed. Her stuttering disappeared, and she seemed happier and more confident. 6 years later, an unexpected call disrupted our peace. It was Thomas. "Melissa, it's Thomas. I want to see my daughter," he demanded, his voice harsh and commanding. A surge of anger washed over me, but I remained firm. "No, Thomas, you lost that right. Don't bother us again," I said and hung up the phone. Looking out the window at Alice, who was playing joyfully in the yard, I felt a profound sense of peace. We had come so far, and I was determined to protect our new life. As I raised Alice, I focused on teaching her to be strong and independent and to always stand up for herself. I wanted her to grow up knowing her worth and never to be controlled or belittled by anyone. This new chapter was about empowerment and ensuring Alice knew she was valued, loved, and free.